Therapist Thrival Guide, where we cover all of the things that graduate school didn't teach you. Welcome to the Therapist Thrival Guide. My name is Miranda Barker. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am here with Dr. Lucas Vellini, LMFT.
Since we're with a real doctor today, I'm a former professor and clinical researcher.
There you go. That's perfect.
Yeah.
We have a special series happening this winter/spring where we're talking about innovative therapies and innovative programs. So I wanted to start with TMS because this is a brand new program that Ellie is offering that I don't know very much about. So I wanted to bring in the experts to talk a little bit more about this program. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I am Suzanne Jasberg, and I'm a physician leading the TMS program.
And I'm Kayla Lindeman. I'm the TMS coordinator, so I'll be managing patients coming in, scheduling, and I'll also help with kind of running patients' treatments as well.
Awesome. Okay. So let's back up a little bit. What does TMS stand for?
TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation.
And what is TMS?
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
What's a transcranial?
Yeah, through the skull.
Okay.
Right?
Oh, sure.
So there's kind of two ways to treat depression, and that's mainly what we're talking about today. There's TMS is being researched for multiple other disorders, but we're going to focus on depression today. So there's kind of two strategies to treat depression, right? One is to prescribe medicines, and that targets the neurochemistry of the brain. But for some people, that just doesn't work very well, or it produces too many side effects. So the other strategy is to target the neurocircuitry of the brain, and you do that by adding energy to the brain. So the most intense form of that is ECT, which is sometimes called shock therapy, electroconvulsive therapy. And that takes two electrodes, it delivers current from one to the other, and in that process, the brain has a seizure. So in order for that to be safe, you have to be under general anesthesia in like a hospital-type operating room.
For ECT.
For ECT.
Okay.
Yep. And it has the potential to cause memory loss. So it works very well, but there are side effects. So the idea behind TMS is to try to deliver energy to the brain in a way without those side effects. So it's not using direct current, and there's no seizure. So there's no anesthesia, and there's no possibility of memory loss. So it delivers energy to the brain using induction, which is a different form of energy delivery, with a magnetic field. So there's a magnetic field inside the helmet that delivers energy to your brain in kind of a like tapping feeling. Kind of feels like people say a woodpecker pecking on your head, which no one has ever experienced, but that's what everyone says it feels like. So it's kind of this pinging sensation, and it goes transcranial through your skull into your brain and stimulates parts of the brain that kind of get down-regulated in depression.
So it's kind of like you're wearing a helmet. Like describe what that looks like. Or
so
what?
The device that we use is a deep TMS device, and it looks like a 50s style hairdryer that you strap on your head, and it delivers the energy in that helmet.
Okay. So why does this work? Like how does this work? I don't understand what's behind this.
I mean, so the medicines that we have for the most part are supplying the brain with extra neurotransmitter, right? So it's giving, your basic medicines for depression are giving the brain extra time or an extra chance at grabbing the neurotransmitters. But if the brain's not firing, the fact that you're giving it all this extra neurotransmitter doesn't really matter that much. And so stimulating the brain with energy upregulates the system, and then it starts firing more rapidly, it starts utilizing the medication, it just like kind of turns back on.
So it's like if you have a certain type of depression or severe depression, then are you saying that like parts of your brain is off? Like how does that?
As a simplification, yeah. Like it just shuts down, or it's not firing at its maximum capacity. And so you're turning it like ECT is kind of like turning your computer off and back on. Like I'm not sure what's wrong, but
like
I'm just going to
the seizure
restart. Where TMS is a little bit more delicate and more like specific to the areas of the brain that need to be restarted.
Okay.
It's kind of like jump starting a dead battery.
Yeah, kind of. Exactly.
Huh. ECT is or TMS
I'd say TMS. Whereas ECT sounds more like replacing the battery. Not like you're replacing the brain, but like it's more of like a subtle way to wake something up that's still working. It just kind of needs a spark to get back going.
I think so, although the car analogies are going to be tough for me. But like restarting your computer versus like closing Word and restarting Word or something like that.
Okay, but so you have a different metaphor though that you use sometimes that I've heard you talk about a little bit more, like the road one. Do you want to kind of explain
Sure.
or go into that one too? Because
So-
that helped me understand.
Yeah. So that is meant to help people understand why the medicine is still important, even
Like antidepressants.
right, even if you didn't respond to it.
So you're saying that if somebody goes through TMS, they might still need to be on antidepressants, might still need to be in therapy, or is TMS just like a cure-all, you're fixed and you never have to do this again?
I mean, that's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
Although people should probably always have therapy as part of their life. But so most people will get better faster and stay better longer if they're on medicine. So that's where the road analogy comes in, because people are always like, "It's the medicine doesn't work. Why would I take it?" So it's like if you say, this is my retirement plan. I'm going to build 50 gas stations down this really busy highway, and everyone's going to use my gas station, and it's going to be great. But then the road's closed. So you have all these gas stations and all this gas, and there's no cars. So it doesn't really matter that you put a gas station every mile, right? Then finally the road gets opened up, there's tons of traffic, and then people are using your gas station all the time. So if the brain's not on, all this extra neurotransmitter that you're giving it kind of doesn't really matter, because it's not utilizing the neurotransmitter at its max capacity. So the fact that you're giving it a little bit more is kind of irrelevant. You have to get the brain to fire to care that there's extra neurotransmitter, if that makes sense.
That's a great metaphor. That makes a lot of sense. And I think what's important about that metaphor too is it's like the gas stations, like they're still there and they can still function. You know, it's like it's not like they all crumble to the ground,
Right.
you know, and you have to rebuild from scratch. It's like they're still there. You just need to free up the blockage, you know, of getting everything to start firing again.
So who should be thinking about doing TMS? Like if I'm a therapist and I'm working with a client that I'm like, maybe you'd be a good candidate for TMS. Like who would benefit from this?
So patients with treatment-resistant depression are the best candidate for TMS, and I absolutely hate that term because we can treat them. It's not hopeless. It feels so hopeless to call it that, but treatment-resistant depression really is just somebody who hasn't responded to, usually for most insurance companies, 4 different medicines.
Okay.
And some require one of a different class, and then also psychotherapy.
A different
So
type
like
of medication.
so like 3 SSRIs and 1 SNRI or something like that,
Okay.
right? And then an adequate course of psychotherapy, and they still have depression, which is a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's a lot of time like spent realizing that these things are not working for you
Oh, yeah.
and like
Yeah.
that.
It's devastating. It's demoralizing. You know, it doesn't inspire you to keep going. But yeah, that term of like a treatment-resistant patient is so stupid.
It's horrible.
You know, like that's just a way that like systems escape their responsibility and put it onto the consumer. You know, it's like it's not that they're treatment resistant, it's that we haven't provided them the proper treatment that will work for them. So this is great. Things like this are exciting. I don't know. I would love to hear about kind of your process and experience of like coming to buy into it. You know, because when new things come out, like in the therapy world, I'm immediately in a position of like, I hate this. This is dumb.
Like this
with,
is new.
But with an open mind to like until the research can convince me otherwise.
You're skeptical.
Yeah, I'm always
Like,
skeptical,
yeah,
and we should be.
You're a
Rightfully we
scientist.
should be. Yeah. So, when did you first like stumble into research on this? Like, how did it come across your radar?
Oh, that's a good question. In residency, right? So a long time ago.
Psychiatry
Residency.
Okay.
Yep. So you get trained in ECT as part of your standard residency experience. But then TMS was kind of new and starting up, I guess. So, you go to these conferences and you meet these researchers and you watch these PowerPoint presentations. And so neuromodulation was always something that was like really interesting to me. So
What does that mean?
Influencing the nervous system with energy.
Okay,
Right.
got it.
So I started off being interested actually in a different type of direct current stimulation that is more experimental, but it's lower risk. And it was being used for psychosis, which is like one of my main
Specialties.
And that has remained mostly in the research space. But TMS then became a FDA-approved treatment for depression. And so kind of naturally became interested in it because I had already sort of been involved in that area. And at that time, I was at the University of Minnesota, which is a big research institution, obviously. So we were connected with a physician, Linda Carpenter, who's like in my little nerd space, like super famous. And she's at Brown, and she is way ahead of her time. And kind of mentored in a way to get started. And Calvin Lim, who's at the University of Minnesota too, who's a big neuroscientist, researcher. And so we started a program there slowly, right? Like a whole team of us, one chair, 2 patients a day. We were all in there like doing it together. And that was 2014. And so then I've been doing it since then. And yeah, I was a little skeptical, right? It seems a little woo-woo, like your magnet, and how's that going to
Almost
really
like
do anything?
science fiction-y, or I don't know. Yeah.
The future.
But the the data's solid.
Okay,
Yeah.
say more about the data. What does the research say about this?
Well, I mean, TMS has been around for forever. This Dr. Barker would use it to stimulate peripheral nerves.
I wonder if I'm related
You might
to her.
be. But you know, it was kind of like a party trick, right? Like, okay, I can stimulate nerves and stuff like that. But Brain Sway was FDA approved in 2013, which is the device we use. And I kind of lost my train of thought.
What's that? Like, what's the efficacy?
So in the pivotal trial to get the Brain Sway device approved, they took people off of their medicines entirely because they had to prove that the device itself did something, right? So they took people off of their medicines entirely and they gave them 20 treatments. And they had like over a 60% response rate,
Wow.
which is in the treatment-resistant depression category, right? So like the
Wow.
statistical likelihood of a 5th, 6th, and in reality, usually people have been on 15, 16 medicines, not just 4, although they would meet criteria. The likelihood of that working is not 0, but it's low.
So, like, the more medications you try and the more that are not working, like the likelihood of a new medication working isn't super high anyways. And so then this new treatment is a good option for them. And 60% of them saw improvement.
And
Wow.
50% of them are still well at a year.
Wow.
But TMS, if it works for you, it'll work again.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And there's a lengthening effect, so it seems to work faster and last longer the more times you do it.
So you said 20 treatments. What's the typical amount of treatments for
So
someone?
clinically, we actually do 36 treatments, and we keep people on their medicines.
And is that weekly, bi-weekly?
It's every day.
Every day.
Well, 5 days a week, yeah.
Wow.
How long does it take?
20 minutes.
So people can just like drop by on their lunch break.
And
You're-
there's no anesthesia,
Oh,
so you
yeah.
can, drive there, drive back to work. You might feel a little tired, but it's doable. We have people that come in the middle of the workday all the time.
Yeah.
What's Kayla? What's been your experience working with TMS? Have you worked in like other aspects of healthcare?
Yeah, so I started with child and adolescents, which I loved. And then I slowly found my path working with adults within TMS, and that's why I'm still here. TMS is wonderful. We see really good results. What's really cool about my job is kind of coordinating the patients coming in, seeing them very, very sick, and having them go through a full course of treatment and seeing them kind of at the end of treatment.
Wow.
So watching them come in and leave, they're usually 2 different people most of the time.
Ah, that's just amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it's 36 divided by 5, right? It's weeks that
Yeah.
you're seeing the progress happen. So it's selfishly
Weeks.
really rewarding for us too, right? Because The change is huge.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes me 3 weeks just to finish a genogram.
With a therapy client, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this is just so cool to hear about how this works and how beneficial it is for people.
Are you finding like resistance to people's openness to this? Like, is there a stigma around it? Like, what are things you want people to know, that might correct or demystify some misconceptions around anything related to, zapping energy into your brain through your skull?
Right. So,
because we all kind of have that image of like the 50s and the paddles and the torture and like,
nest, right?
yeah,
Which
yeah.
ruined it for everybody. Yeah. Well, I usually also do mention to people that is not a realistic depiction of ECT. ECT is a very calm and very controlled procedure. You're given a paralytic, so your body does not move. So your brain is having a seizure and your toe is having a seizure essentially, and nothing else is moving. So this idea that you're like, strapped down to a table and it's like barbaric is just wholly inaccurate.
So ECT has come a long way even.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Hollywood doesn't always
Hollywood gets it
properly
wrong
capture the medical field?
Yeah.
Crazy.
So it's not that.
Yeah.
And also that isn't that bad. But it's not that. You're awake. Your brain does not have a seizure. It is an intense feeling, but it's not painful. And it works. And it's not woo-woo experimental. It's a very legitimate treatment strategy.
So are you using the current on the whole brain, or are there like parts of the brain that you're using? Like I guess I'm just curious, like what part of your brain is being affected by this?
Yeah. So the main target is the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. So
Where's
the left
that?
front part of your brain.
Okay.
Right? The figure 8 superficial TMS devices, the coil looks like a figure 8 and it sits on your head over just the left side. The BrainsWay coil is shaped like an H, and the way it's positioned in the helmet, it gives you some right-sided stimulation too. So it's a little bit wider and a little bit deeper on the left side, and then it adds in that right-sided stimulation, which differentiates it from superficial TMS.
So it's only that one part of your brain that's being, I see, okay.
Whereas with ECT, you're taking direct current and either putting an electrode here to theoretically stimulate half the brain, or here and here to stimulate current through the whole brain.
So for people who are listening to it and not watching the YouTube
sorry.
channel, no, so Dr. Jasberg is pointing to different parts of her brain where on either side of the eye or on the forehead or different things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Left front part.
Yes. Interesting. So is it's the same spot for everybody? Like that's where your depression lives in your brain, or?
Yeah. And there's no marker for that area of the brain, right? So when we are setting up treatment and setting somebody up to start TMS, you have to orient yourself in their brain. So the way that you do that is you aim for the motor strip. So the motor strip of the brain you can find with the TMS machine.
The part that controls like your hands or
but yes, we're looking for the thumb.
Okay.
There's like a bigger part of your brain that's dedicated to having opposable thumbs. It makes us fancy mammals. So you can find that with the machine. You can find the foot, you can find the arm too, but for depression, you look for the thumb.
Okay, wait a second. So what you're saying, there's so much I don't know about this. This is fascinating. So what you're saying is you can zap different parts of your brain, kind of like if you go to a doctor's office and they hit your
reflex,
knee and it just like goes like that.
But I can ping your brain and
it'll make your thumbs move.
Your thumb move. I can make your hand move. What do you want to move? Your foot? I can do that.
And you can do that with a TMS machine. You can just be like boop, 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 and then it'll like,
we take the machine and we deliver single pulses around where we think the motor strip most likely is.
Yeah.
And then you find the area that best stimulates the thumb.
Yeah.
And then you reduce the energy until you find the least amount of energy that moves the thumb. And then that's your starting like anchor location point and your dose.
That's like the North Star, where it's it's kind of like once you find that, then you can be like, oh, the Big Dipper is over here, or you know.
No, that's a really good way of describing it, because we know from big MRI studies that most people's DLPFC is this much in front of their thumb on their motor cortex.
That is so fascinating.
It's really cool.
Huh.
And so would you say because this is how I view depression at like an experiential level, like in therapy world, not necessarily specifically through neuroscience, but like when you're depressed, a lot of people put all of their focus into identifying the depression and trying to fix the depression, whereas, you know, what your treatment does, it's almost like it's not that you need to target where the depression is, it's you need to target all the things that are surrounding the depression that aren't being exercised, you know, or aren't being invested in, because once those things start to come back to life, then depression just kind of diminishes because there's just more energy in the brain that's being spread about. You're just more alive. You feel more alive. You know, that's what you're seeing in these people who come in at the beginning of treatment, weeks later when they're leaving. Like the way you're talking about them, it's like they're alive. And it sounds like it's more like you're just waking up their full brain than resolving like a specific issue in the brain.
Yeah, it is kind of like waking it back up or turning it back on. And actually, TMS and therapy have way more similarities than people think, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
TMS and therapy is probably more similar than medicine and TMS because they're both targeting neurocircuitry. Like what pathway is firing. And then we put energy into the brain and you help the preferential pathway fire, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like some of the most breathtaking research I've ever read is everything that's come out of interpersonal neurobiology and how that's helped to explain human development, you know, and the whole emphasis of, you know, like one of the Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson's initial bestseller was The Whole Brain Child, you know, and it's all about how we can nurture neurological development in kids so that their right hemisphere is in constant communication with their left hemisphere, that there's bilateral neural integration, you're using your whole brain, everything's constantly communicating to each other. And when that's not happening, that's when we fall into anxiety, depression, you know, less resources to cope with traumas. And so would you say TMS kind of serves a function of stimulating bilateral neural integration?
Yeah, and I mean, this whole concept of pruning, right?
Yeah.
And like pruning's not done when you're 25.
Yeah.
I mean, your brain has neuroplasticity, and it has neuroplasticity until you are no longer alive. So this idea that there's like this hard cutoff is just not true. So and people respond like, we've had patients who are elderly and they get better. So don't tell me that your brain can't change after 25, right? Like that's just not true.
So does that also mean that you don't do TMS on people under 25?
No, but it is 18 plus at this point. So in adolescence, it's still in clinical trials.
I'm so grateful my brain has changed since I was 25.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
So if I were a therapist, I mean, I am a therapist, but if I was a therapist listening to this podcast and I had a client in mind that was like, you know, they've been in therapy forever. They've tried a bunch of different medications. How would I know that this could be a viable option for them?
So the main criteria would be that treatment-resistant category, which you'll be able to figure out pretty quickly because you'll know them very well. They can't have a seizure disorder, right?
Oh, sure.
So the biggest possible side effect of TMS is inducing a seizure. And so if they have epilepsy or something like that, they can't participate. It's a magnetic field, so think about an MRI, right? They can't have a bullet in their cheek or shrapnel in their eyes or something like that.
Can they have a nose ring?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we usually have people take their jewelry
out. Okay, that's
right. It could heat up depending on what the metal is, right? They can't have active psychosis, and they can't have, at this point, bipolar disorder. It's not approved for bipolar depression. It's just approved for unipolar depression at this point.
Why? Just lack of research, or
It's
has
just that
it
was
demonstrated?
first.
Okay, so they just haven't gotten there yet.
It's in clinical trials.
Okay.
So right now, MDD, OCD, smoking, cessation are approved.
Okay.
And literally everything else is being researched.
Smoking cessation is so interesting to me. Why?
Which also leads into other substance use disorders. So it could be really, really, really powerful in that space too.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? I mean, is it really the same part of your brain that
Good question. The different helmets have different coils and different targets.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so you can manipulate per intervention, what you're targeting, what you're stimulating. And it makes smoking cessation is like one of the easiest things to get grant funding for, because the healthcare costs associated with smokers are massive. And so everyone wants, like, if there's a potential treatment, it's like they'll throw money at you, to see if it works for smoking cessation. How many people would you say, is it predominantly depression? How many people come in for smoking cessation purposes?
The problem is
Insurance.
Oh. See, that's insane. It's like
Correct.
telling insurance companies, none of you are listening.
Oh, they're listening.
No, they're not. To this.
They saw the description. They were like, Dr. Lucas Valini. Oh, we have to listen to what he has.
It's like
to
approve
say.
this. Like if you're trying to save money and reduce your costs, from your customers, it's like get this approved ASAP. Start reimbursing for
What's
it.
more expensive, TMS or chemotherapy?
And the 100 other diseases related to smoking. So, come on.
His email address is. I'm just kidding.
Oh, they'll be hearing from me.
I mean, we talked a little bit about what a therapist, how a therapist might know their client this would be beneficial for them. How can a therapist kind of partner with people that are doing TMS? Like, do you two regularly talk to the therapist or not? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all about coordination of care here at Ellie Mental Health.
I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah, we love referrals from therapists. So sometimes we get referrals from other psychiatrists who are like, you've been on 15 medicines. Why don't we try something different? Right? And that's usually the selling point for people who are nervous about it is like, you could respond to another medicine, but it seems like statistically it's time to shift gears and have a totally different approach. But so sometimes we get referrals from like people themselves that just like Googled it or heard about it or from a friend or whatever. But therapists give great referrals. The criteria is not really that complicated and you have a good relationship with them. And so talking about something that seems a little bit scary usually goes well.
Yeah.
And if you can describe it kind of simplistically, like it's a way to deliver energy to your brain that's safe and it's not like ECT, but it works and it's new and it's a totally different approach. And we have it here at Ellie. That's the thing that's cool is that, we could have TMS and they could have their therapist and their medicines all managed with one team, which is great.
Yeah.
That is so nice.
And if you have a client out there that you think could be a good fit for this and they have a lot of questions and curiosities, just have them watch this or listen to it.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like you explained it really well. Like, I have a better understanding of what this is.
And we also created, do you want to talk about the JOT form? We created a form that helps walk through criteria to help you kind of screen those questions. So maybe you don't have to memorize them, but you could pull that up and be like, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very simple form. It's just a referral form. Anyone that's interested can kind of look at it, and it's very straightforward.
So what are the things you look for? Like, what are the things you want to know?
Yeah, so I screen the patients out. So patients are screened out initially before they would meet with Dr. Jasberg. So they do an evaluation, which I always let patients know too is a really good starting point to kind of make sure that you would be, the patient would be a good candidate, that this would be a good next step in treatment. And Dr. Jasberg meets with the patient for an hour. That's kind of the starting point. But I screen out that they're 18 years of age or older, that MDD is a diagnosis, that they've tried, at least 4 medications, and then the psychotherapy part. And patients can always call me too. I've worked with, hundreds of patients to talk about TMS if they have questions, concerns, maybe what it looks like a day in the life of a TMS patient. So that's something that I do too. They can always call and kind of chat with me as well before they would meet with the doctor.
So I'll put in the link of this video or the link of this podcast or the description of this video or the description of the podcast. I'll put a link to the referral form that has the information about screening and everything. And then also probably just put a link to our website for more information about TMS too.
And is that an authorization thing? Like they need to have documented that they've tried 4 medications that have failed before it'll get approved?
Sometimes insurance will request, they'll request all the things about every single medication they've tried and the dates of service that they tried it. Some are a little bit more lenient, so we just try to get the patient in. We try to make it as easy as possible to get them in for the evaluation. If insurance is requesting that, we'll request it. If not, we usually can move them forward.
We try to document to the extreme, right? Yeah. For the most intense payers. Not the most intense approvers, I should say. But I mean, we make sure that people meet criteria. We don't want to give someone a treatment that they don't meet criteria for and risk that, obviously. But some insurances approve it just with the note. Some insurances require prior authorizations. We just deal with that as part of the job.
So as you're talking about like the different requirements and like trying different medications, I'm curious if gene site testing is something that we talk a lot about, or I feel like I've been hearing a lot about it recently, and I'm curious if I know that you can do the testing, it'll say if this type of medication isn't necessarily, can it be metabolized for your DNA? I don't know exactly how it works.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm curious because, and let me try to think of how I'm wording this question. Let's say you're someone who has been through a bunch of different types of medication. You take the gene site testing. It's like, hey, these SSRIs are not going to work for you. Correct me if I am wrong. I feel
I'll let you keep going.
Okay. But then you do TMS. Could they then start working for you? I guess I don't understand how.
Yeah. So kind of two answers to that question. The short answer is meds that didn't work prior to TMS could absolutely work after. And that has to do with the car and the gas station analogy, right? Gene site testing is very interesting. Mm-hmm. What it does is it takes your DNA and it looks at mostly your P450s, which is a specific type of enzyme in your liver that metabolizes drugs. And it tells you, are you likely to metabolize this drug regularly, faster than average, or slower than average, right? And then to what degree? And then it sorts them into green, yellow, red. And then you get it and you're like, I need to be on a green medicine. Mm-hmm. And that's just not true. Mm-hmm. But maybe if you're prescribing a red medicine and you're a super fast metabolizer, you need to crank it to the top dose, right? Maybe if you have tons of side effects and can't tolerate even whiffs of Lexapro, it's because you're a super slow metabolizer and your dose is the equivalent to 20 milligrams in somebody else, right? So that's what GeneSight is useful for, to help you figure out maybe why somebody hasn't responded to these or why they've had side effects with this grouping of medicines. But it can't drive you off of the major algorithms for what order to treat people in and what medicines, how to move people through classes of medicines.
Sure.
So I always tell people we can get it and we can talk about it. We can usually figure that information out anyways just by talking and looking at your history and making a list. But if you want that information about your liver, cool.
But doing TMS won't change the, yeah, okay. Nope. Interesting. A lot to learn.
This is great. This is so cool.
Yeah,
I love this stuff.
Do you have any other questions about TMS?
Yeah.
Always.
A zillion. But no, I think this will be super helpful. I love that you came to Ellie, and you were like, can I buy this super expensive machine? Yeah. And you were like, yeah.
Thank you.
And so, get the word out, let people know that this is a treatment that's now an option. I'm sure state to state it's varying as far as insurance companies that are reimbursing for it and whatnot. How long would you predict it's going to be until it's more mainstream?
All insurances will cover it.
Oh, so they are covering it for those three conditions.
Well, for OCD, no, only in Minnesota's one right now.
Okay, so we're still kind of in that slow grow, but for depression.
For depression, it's we've made it.
Okay, great. Yeah. How popular would you say it's becoming? How many TMS machines are there in the state of Minnesota?
There's quite a few. Yeah, okay. I don't know the exact number, but there's quite a few clinics kind of within the state of Minnesota.
Great.
So I should probably clarify too. We're recording this in Minnesota, and this is available for Minnesota Ellie clients. If you are at an Ellie or a different clinic outside of the state, then it's going to be clinic dependent, whether or not there's medication management programs, whether or not just what's available at your specific Ellie.
Yeah, but find, and if there's not, one nearby, find a location with a provider that is offering it,
Definitely.
and get them there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you're doing. I love that you brought this to Ellie. And yeah, we'll do what we can to keep getting the word out and getting more people in your door.
Yeah,
Great.
send us people.
I love it.
And I'm just so jealous of like the rapid transformation y'all get to witness. I see clients for years.
Maybe they would be good candidates for
yeah,
TMS
yeah.
if you're seeing
I
them
should
for
retire.
years.
Yeah, just send them to TMS. But this is great. Thank you
Yeah,
for
thank you
being
both
here
so
and
much.
doing the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Any final thoughts, closing statements?
Send us referrals.
Send us referrals.
Yeah.
We're not scary.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Awesome.